everyone, this is Jennifer Thibeaux, and today I want to talk to you a little bit about emotional intelligence. That term, as you know, has been just thrown around in several arenas, at work, at home. We see it on talk shows. We see it on newscasts when they're talking about the intelligence of something or someone kind of losing control, road rage. Oftentimes people will tie in concepts of emotional intelligence to help to explain why these phenomenons happen. And we even see them just simply in our daily lives, in our relationships, whether we realize it or not. There are a lot of mechanisms that come into play with the concepts of emotional intelligence. There is the neuroscience portion of emotional intelligence, and there is the personal development side of emotional intelligence. Now, those things work in concert to really make it all make sense to you. And so oftentimes you'll either see a book that focuses purely on the neuroscience of it, because emotional intelligence has to do with the brain. And then other times you'll see books that may not necessarily even mention emotional intelligence, but they are absolutely referring to those basic concepts. So I wanted to give you a little bit of information about emotional intelligence. Well, let's start back, and I'm talking way back to the time of Socrates, which is one of our first opportunities to really understand where people were starting to focus on emotional intelligence. Socrates said what? Know thyself. And so that, became some of the ongoing theorists that continue to build on it even to this day. Emotional intelligence was really popularized in 1995 with a book titled Emotional Intelligence by Dr. Daniel Goleman. Dr. Daniel Goleman is probably the most well-known theorist and author and researcher on emotional intelligence. However, there are tons of people that came before him that are currently researching, that have variations of an emotional intelligence model. Neither of those models are better or worse. They're just different, with different theories of why the different researchers put certain concepts together. So that's just what that is. I tend to skew towards the emotional intelligence model of Dr. Goleman. However, there are some great models out there that all have some of the same basic concepts. Okay, so I have this handy dandy brain here. I can't show you mine. So I figured I'd show you this one. All right, so this is the brain, right? The brain actually has two halves, as you can see. So the left side of the brain, or I guess to you it's like the right, and then the other side of the brain, right? So in the center of the brain, you see this colorful part. Well, that center is part of that is your limbic system, okay? Limbic system is one of the oldest parts of the brain. That is your emotional repository. In that limbic system, it houses every bit of your emotional experiences from the time that you were born. Whether you're able to recall them or not, they really are housed there. I like to call it the emotional library. And so it's up to you as how good of a librarian are you to be able to pull those emotions, the correct emotions and the correct understanding of our emotions, so that we can have the outcome that we're interested in. A lot of people think that emotional intelligence is mumbo jumbo. It doesn't mean anything. I hear that quite a bit. There's quite a few objections to emotional intelligence because it's not always tangible. We can't always put our hands on it. A lot of people like to throw out IQ versus EQ. So IQ versus EQ. Well, IQ is completely a formula that says that you are as smart as someone of whatever age, okay? So if I'm 10 years old, but I have an IQ of 120, that means I am 10, but I'm as smart as a 12-year-old. Well, that means something when you're around that age, means far less once you become an adult. What does it mean if I'm 40 years old, but I'm as smart as a 50-year-old? What does that really mean, right? So please, if you're an adult, stop quoting what your IQ is, because it doesn't matter. What is going to start to matter is your ability to handle your EQ, your emotional intelligence. That tends to be the actual difference maker as you look at people's success. So if that in fact is the case, this EQ, this difference maker, well, how do you understand it? Well, Dr. Goleman has four what he calls constructs, four major areas within this EQ model. quite simply, the first area is talking about understanding yourself and your own emotions. And there's several competencies that he lists under there. The second construct, this major category area, is how do I manage myself? So first I'm going to understand what my emotions are and go through a process of self-awareness and all of these things. Then how do I manage that? How do I motivate myself? How do I have drive and adaptability and all those things that make me who I am? So that's half the model. The other half of the model really talks about things like what is your social awareness? So that's the third construct. So how are you aware of the things around you, all the things that are coming into play? That's the third. The very fourth, so there's kind of like two sides. One side is about self, the other side is about society, those things around you. It's relationship management. How do you manage those relationships? Now that's important because that's where you see leadership in that fourth construct, that fourth category. You always tell people, or you've heard this concept, well, you can't lead others if you can't lead yourself. And that certainly is the case. You can't get to this fourth area, this advanced area of emotional intelligence and lead people if you can't even understand your own emotions. How can you possibly understand and advise and lead people if you can't even do that for yourself? So I like the model because there's a lot of common sense built into it. There's a lot of logic. I'm a logic person. That is my personality. So I'm always looking for that logic throughout a model. Dr. Goldman identified about 25 competencies, each that kind of fall into parts of what that four construct model is. Now that comes across as complex, honestly. And so that's hard for a lot of people to understand unless you're just a nerd and want to do things like grab a brain and study it. But that is the basic concepts of emotional intelligence. And I'm probably going to march down and talk about each of the competencies and where they come into play. But I will stay tuned for things like amygdala hijack. You may have heard that term before. And we'll talk about other concepts of plasticity. The brain is plastic. That's a unique concept as well. So I'll talk about that. Look for that. Blog, email me, contact me. This is what energizes me to really learn more about myself, learn more about emotional intelligence, and hopefully together we will all improve our emotional intelligence. See you next time.